Welcome back to the Tasting Room. This is a fun episode. Aaron Underwood in the house. How are you doing, sir?
I'm wonderful, John. I appreciate it, man.
Of course. So do you want to give everyone your official job title? I don't try to guess or like remember people's job titles. I just ask and then...
Just a straight up regional sales director.
Okay.
You know, so markets are Oregon, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and beautiful state of Oklahoma.
So I think the important thing is that we say who for. So Kermit Lynch Wine
Kermit
Merchants.
Lynch Wine
correct?
Merchant.
Okay,
Those guys.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's the important part of this. That's why we have
That's
good
the
looking
important
wines in
bottle
here.
placements to make sure that we...
How'd you get into that? What was your foray into that world?
Oh, God.
And real quick, do you care which one I pour first? Or do you want to talk about what you brought?
Jump in there.
Let's do that.
We'll talk about it real quick.
Okay.
I just wanted something at least that we could enjoy. We don't have to go deep down into the wine, especially since Tempier Bandol Rosé kind of speaks for itself a bit.
Fair.
Yeah, that one's always interesting when people ask me to talk about it. I'm like, nah, that's
No, just drink it and we'll be good.
Guess what? You drink
I'll
it,
be that person. Yeah.
you'll love it. But then hopefully we'll end up talking about the Denajan Robert Denajan family. We brought a bottle of Le Puy Fusé that's it's like maybe 100-year-old vines and.
No big deal.
No big deal.
So back to my question. How did you get into this world?
Oh, from the wine hub of the Western United States, living in Reno, Nevada,
Right.
Got to be the only guy that's found his wine career out of Reno, Nevada. Usually people
More power to you, though. Yeah.
Yeah, most people find out they're a wino or something in, Reno, Nevada. I ended up moving up there in, 18 years ago. From Southern California. I was a stockbroker in Southern California. Hated my life. Just horrible. Not something I wanted to be doing for long term. And had some family move up to Reno that I followed and had no idea what I was going to do, like at all. I'm like 31 years old. A friend at a bar that I met said, "Do you want to work at a restaurant?" I'm like, am I a little old for that? For never doing this ever. I never worked in a restaurant in my life.
Right.
It's like, just come on. You'll have fun. It's a good group of people. You do it. Go there. I was horrible. Like the world's worst server ever, man.
That's a pretty bad statement.
It was difficult. I'm in a new area. I had no idea like what I was going to be doing. I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna jump into this world. And it was a soft opening of this place. This lady, I'll always remember this. So you're lucky this is kind of a romantic, good story here. So
right, absolutely. I feel honored to be hearing this story.
Probably too many people have heard this one. At the restaurant, it's a soft opening. This lady comes up to me. She's like, "You guys have this by the glass. I cannot believe it." I'm like, "What is it?" She's like, "It's a Sancerre." And this is before the Sancerre craze we have now. I was like, I had to say, I was like, I have no idea what that is. She's like, "It's Sauvignon Blanc." I said, "I do not like Sauvignon Blanc." And she goes,
"Try this. Yeah.
Try this." And I remember the moment, remember the lady's face. I remember where I was at this bar of the restaurant, took a drink, and it's like electricity. It was wild. And she's like, "Oh, it's this producer in Sancerre called Hippolyte Reverdy, which is a Kermit Lynch wine." And I had no idea who Kermit Lynch was. I had no idea about the wines. I went to the wine buyer and I said, "Is this the guy that did the staff training?" She's like, "Yeah." I said, "Next time he's in, can I please just sit down with you guys and just try to learn what he has? Because I've never had wine like this in my life." She's like, "Yeah, let's do it." 3 months go by. Owner of the restaurant's like, "Aaron, we love you, but you're just not that good at this job."
Back to the you're not good at a server
you're
job.
Not a really good server. It's just not in the cards. And what happened is they ended up kind of putting me together with the guy that was bringing the wines. He was the owner of a small distributor in Reno, Nevada, and he gave me a job. I'd never been in the wine business ever, and so I'm in Reno, Nevada. This is, this is 2005, I think, right around there. In 2005 in Reno, there was a distributor there called Cepage that had Kermit Lynch, Louis Dresner, Jenny and Francois, all these like really niche, very difficult to sell in a place like Reno, Nevada, where everyone, a 2.5 hour drive from Napa Valley. And that's all we got to do. That's all we had. I had no California wine to be able to offer. So you're just constantly showing all these just gorgeous wines. And I think it was like I had that work ethic of being in the finance business. And so I just took it very serious and I just went in it. And it went really well. And ended up getting a job offer from a California wine producer. And I took it. And then got a phone call from Bruce Nyers, who was at that time the national sales manager for Kermit Lynch and probably one of the most iconic people in this wine business there is. He calls me up. He's like, "Why?" He's like, "What are you doing?" I said, I got to take another job, man. He's like, "I need you selling wine." I'm like, I want to work for you one day. So I want to get experience working for like a producer or managing markets. He's like, "Okay, all right, do it." And it was 4 years later, I got a phone call just before he retired. And him and Lyle Rails back and Kermit Lynch, they're just like, come on board. We have a spot for you. And if anybody would have ever told me that this is what I'd be doing, back in that day, I would, there's no possible way. Not because I wouldn't want to, but because I just never would have thought that I'd have that opportunity. It's, it's still every day I wake up going like, what do I get to do? Oh yeah. All right. This is okay.
Yeah.
Not a bad thing.
No.
So, yeah. And here we are now. I've been with this position for, Sunday will be 5 years.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Appreciate it. Yeah. We keep track of that because at Kermit Lynch, you have, when you start, you get an email introduction to everybody just saying, oh, this is, who this person is, this and that. That's it. Until you're there for 5 years. After 5 years, they send another email to everybody. This is his 5-year anniversary or her 5-year anniversary. And then after another 5 years, they send another one. And so whenever I would be sitting there the first few years, I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait to be, I'm that guy and that, because I'm like a baby there. The average tenure at Kermit Lynch is like 14, 15 years.
Jeez.
Of everybody.
That's awesome.
Wild.
That speaks well to the company.
Yeah. People don't want to leave, I mean, there's worse things to be doing, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely speaks to, I would imagine, the culture of the company that so many people are so tenured there. For people that don't know, like, when you hear wine merchant, what does that mean? Like, what is Kermit Lynch wine merchant? That's
a good question. I think wine merchant's a fancy name for people selling wine, man. Just, but, I mean, that's one of the things we just love to talk about, something that, especially since last year we just had our 50th anniversary. So it's been 50 years of Kermit Lynch being a wine merchant. But so Kermit started as importing wine. So we're importing just French and Italian wines only. Kermit got his start. God, he was in the Bay Area. If I remember this right, he was buying carpet scraps from people and making women's handbags out of
Let me pause you for a second. You said carpet scraps. And in my mind, when I hear the word merchant, I think of Aladdin, right? So carpet scraps, they're flying carpets. Well, like, that's what it fits.
He's that good. Kermit Lynch made the first flying carpet, actually.
There you go.
That's how we brought first wines over. And he would sell, the women's handbags he'd make out of carpet scraps and at a flea market.
Incredible.
And then someone offered him money, I remember right, for the business. And he was just like, sure.
Take it. Yeah.
Then just fell in love with the culture of, and that's a big part of like what we do is the fact that, there's that culture in old world countries that have been, drinking wine. It's a social event. It's a social, it's also part of their cuisine. It's, maybe even the wines are, a certain way or made a certain way to match the cuisine they have in the area. And, we don't have that here. We just haven't, established that since we're such a young kind of wine producing nation. So when he was there, just kind of fell in love with that whole idea of people, you drank wine with food, with great food. Yeah. I love the idea of, sitting around enjoying a, glass of whiskey or something, and the same way I view like a big Cabernet or something.
See, I didn't know you that well. I normally have bourbon, but I didn't know if you were a whiskey bourbon person. So I knew TC would supply the wines, And so I was like, all right, we can just do wine this time, but next time.
It's been 3 days though. You'd have to catch me on day 1 in Oklahoma because after 3 days of it, of plenty of wine and whiskey and everything.
Let's talk through your schedule. So I know last night you had the wine dinner at Amelia's. How'd that go?
Amazing. Yeah. So well. She's a force.
She's fantastic, and that restaurant is fantastic.
Oh yeah. So I love being able to go there. I last time I was there, we did like a staff training and just talked about some of the wines they had on the list. I'm still to this day. I mean, I'm still shocked every single time I do an event that even in Oklahoma, which I mean in the best possible way, that there's people there that are like, I would never miss this. You know, I mean, this is the person who has been with me through my whole kind of wine drinking and understand that that's who I can trust and rely on. And they're fans. They're not just there because obviously they're fans of Amelia and being there at the restaurant, but being there at, for that reason, it's just so cool. It's just humbling, amazing. So we had that. We had a trade event that we did too at Oren. And then we came in that day. I was in Oklahoma City before that. We did a trade tasting there, did a wine dinner at a country club. And I mean, it's always just
go.
So, I'm actually only like 24 years old. I just look this way because of the go.
Right.
Drink.
I do love Matt and Oren. They do a fantastic job over there as well.
Great job.
That's one of my favorite parts about Tulsa and like doing this podcast and just knowing the industry as I do. Like, it's kind of like you said, it's not meant in a insultatory, or if that's a word, or insulting way towards Tulsa, but the food scene here, like I have some of my favorite restaurants in the state are in Oklahoma City, but the rest of them are here. And the food scene here is really, really good.
Well, and you have, that's like, there's certain areas in the country, you end up just kind of falling in love with the idea and the concept of it all because they take it so serious. It is a profession. It is a profession. It's one of the greatest professions. You're out there providing an atmosphere for people, opening their minds with, foods, wines, it's an incredible kind of industry to be a part of. And I love it. There's certain cities that just take that, really serious. And, you get that and you see it here, without a doubt. So it's, people think of just, flyover states kind of thing.
Right.
I have people ask me all the time, in the business, other producers, other importers, and like, oh, you have Oklahoma, man, that must be kind of rough. You probably don't go out there much. I'm like, no, I don't. Nah, it's really difficult. It's a difficult place.
You don't want to go there.
I'm like, you don't want to go there at all.
Yeah.
You don't want to see that, that Ranch Acres has probably one of the greatest.
Emily's one of my favorites. I love Ranch Acres to death.
One of the best setups, one of the greatest, really import wine, selections there is. And I don't want anyone else to know that because now it's out. But
I can edit that part out.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
So do you deal with both on-premise and off-premise?
Yeah.
Or do you just have one or the other that you focus on?
That's a great question because it is a big part of our business is that we have to rely on independent businesses. We don't have enough wine. We also don't want to deal with business of like grand scale. So none of the big box stores, no national grocery chains. It's just we have to rely on that, small independent retailer, rely on that small independent restaurateur. A lot of times that's how people end up learning about some of our wines. Is that there's a restaurant that has something by the glass that no one would ever even have tried somewhere else, and they love it. They then go to their local retailer saying, "Hey, do you have this?" And that's kind of how we get a lot of times new producers and new wines kind of to take off, and so we have to rely on that. So it's seeing some of the issues and the stresses and, what comes with it, especially during COVID and stuff that a lot of the small businesses went through. It was tough, really tough. But, I was just happy to be with a, established company that has been doing business right and made it through it.
Yeah. So only doing French and Italian wines, how have you seen, like, I don't want to say America as a whole because I know it's just so vastly different between like East Coast, West Coast, and then the flyover Midwestern states that you're talking about. But just, in a broad sense, Americans can be very like, oh, I only want to drink American Napa stuff, or I want to do this. How have you seen the French and Italian wines kind of take hold in the U.S.?
And again, it does kind of depend on the market a bit. But I think we've just turned into such a global kind of, marketplace as a whole that, we still get, it depends a lot of times, maybe even age groups and stuff that, like, well, that's all I've ever drank is, American wines. And, I drive my Ford pickup truck and I have my American wines and I only eat this American.
So when you
whatever.
say that, do you see that it's older or younger?
That's what I was trying to actually put together. If there's really is one, because one thing is that our clientele a lot of times is older clientele.
Okay.
Because I think you also get to that point where, you grow up and you become a professional, you become maybe, you found your way and you're a little more comfortable in your means and you can afford a $50 bottle of wine, and a lot of times that's, something that we have to kind of rely on because none of these, the wines are, it's hard to, sell. We have everything coming from, $12 retail wines to $4,000, $5,000 retail wines.
That's a big gap.
It's a big gap.
That's yeah.
So you're relying on a really big demographic,
Sure.
At that time. But we do see a lot of younger people now getting into wine, and it's one of those things that I think I don't know, go straight into this right now because it's a topic that we talk about all the time.
Let's go.
But the natural wine world kind of
yes, I did want to talk to you about this.
I knew we'd get there. It's always it's always a topic.
There. Yeah.
I had to come to grips with that a bit because it's tough because it's gone kind of all over the place. But if one thing though it's done is it's got younger people to drink wine. And they probably would have never been drinking wine until they got much older. And we're already starting to see that kind of correction of it too. And I hate to call it correction, but like maybe they started off with, this really kind of unique, crazy, natural wine. And then as they get a bit older now, we've seen through enough years, they're like, oh man, I really like this wine, kind of world. And let's try some of these more serious wines. Let's try a wine that is from a certain region that should taste a certain way. And that's when we kind of capture that audience back in. And so really it's helped us a lot. And in a way, we're a lot of times Kermit's been, and the producers we have been, inspiration for those people making those natural wines. So
I'm curious, and you can plead the fifth on this or say, I don't want to answer this, but I've had people sit across from me that have both talked about the benefits and virtues of natural wine, and then people that have said it's marketing bullshit. That every wine technically is a natural wine if you make it correctly and this and that. Do you fall anywhere in that sphere of what do you think of natural wine? And again, you can say, hey, we're not going to talk about this because I don't want to.
The nicest way possible.
Yeah. Or you can just be a complete ass. It's fine.
Someone saying that natural wine is just a marketing ploy is because of the fact that they can't make it. They haven't figured it out. They don't want to take the risk. They don't want to take the work to do it. Yeah. It's hard. It's a lot of work.
I would imagine. Yeah.
We're going to go straight into being an asshole. If, you get someone who's just sold your, company for, hundreds of millions of dollars and you want your name on a wine label and you have a winemaker that does it for you. They just got out of school. They're going to make it. You want to make sure that wine tastes the same way every year. It's easy to do with, making up a kind of a recipe and having a way of, using industrial commercial yeast and adding different enzymes and adding whatever you need. And you can do that, and it takes quite a bit of time and effort to get to that point where you can make what we want and what we expect from people is making a natural wine that you shouldn't really know that it's a natural wine. Yeah. I mean, there's some things that, after you've been drinking for a long time, you kind of, this Robert Denegent, it's probably one of the most alive white wines I've ever had in my life. It's just, you could just feel the life in it. It's incredible. And that comes from that. It doesn't taste flawed. It doesn't taste, I helped somebody with a food and wine festival in Portland, and they were doing a natural wine panel. And this girl asked me kind of set up some of the wines, and I suggested a Guy Breton Morgon. He's one of our Beaujolais producers, one of the original, guys that started the whole natural wine movement. And someone on that panel tried the wine, and they're like, why is this wine on this panel? They're like, this is not natural.
This is not a natural
it's
wine.
not natural wine.
Which is the best compliment you
Doubt
can receive.
this is even
right?
native yeast fermented, all this whole thing. And I'm just sitting there going like, oh my God. But that is it. That is, it's the fact that it just tasted like beautiful wine. It wasn't something they were looking for a flaw. You know, it's like, okay, if it tastes like shit, it must, okay, it's natural, you know? So there's the point where it does get a little bit too much for us. And, you know, I would hope that people kind of jump onto that a bit, maybe thinking, shoot, well, maybe I need to be looking at this at more of a grassroots kind of way. I mean, I think that Napa and California as a whole kind of gets a bad rap at times because, I mean, you've got places like Frog's Leap or Gurgitch Hills. It's like, I have nothing against the wines. I don't drink them, but respect the hell out of them. You know, those guys doing biodynamic farming, dry farming, you know, making wines that are pretty much natural, but maybe they use new oak or, you know, it's, you know, warm area and big high alcohol. They want to make it that certain way, but they're being respectful of the earth. They're being respectful of, you know, what's in the bottle. And, you know, those are the things that, you know, we have to kind of look at as a whole of, you know, saying this is, you know, they're doing a good thing.
Yeah.
So
is that just a U.S. thing, natural wines? Or do they,
not at all.
Do they use that moniker elsewhere as well?
It is a moniker that it's kind of, it's tough for us at times. We're like, do I want to use it?
Right.
You know, minimal intervention, zero intervention. You know,
So those are code words for natural wine as well. Yeah.
But I've talked to Kermit about this once, 1980, whatever it was, that he wrote his book, Adventures in the Wine Route. He talks about it as natural wine. And he used that term back in the 80s. And I think that probably came from just, you know, realizing that there was a difference in how wines are made. And you had to kind of have some kind of, you know, differentiation of, you know, kind of make sure that you have a term that shows that there are people out there that are making a wine that aren't manipulating the hell out of it, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, a natural wine as a whole, I mean, I had someone one time reach out to me from a wine bar. It was in Portland, Oregon, and she was in Georgia, and, you know, in the country, not, you know, Atlanta.
Right.
And she's like, I was in Georgia and I was at a natural wine fair and I had all these wines. She's like, they were spectacular. They were clean. They were beautiful. They tasted nothing like what we have here, the same wines. And I think that was something that Kermit figured out a long time ago. I mean, really at the very beginning was that if he was going to bring these wines over, they had to be treated with just the utmost respect and care. And so whenever he started bringing wines over, he was the first person to ever say, I was going to use just refrigerated containers only. Because back in the day, they'd be shipping them the cheapest way they could. You'd have containers and ships going through Panama Canal in the middle of summer.
Nice and warm.
Baking the hell out of the stuff. And people would then, you know, say, okay, should I have to even add more preservatives to the wine to make sure it gets through those kind of situations? And so for him to find these wines that were being made in this way, they were really never meant to or thought about, you know, exporting the wines because they knew that they wouldn't last. They wouldn't hold up. And so that, you know, we still to this day, every one of our distributors has to sign an agreement saying that they will use refrigerated containers. Some of the wines, they have to sign an agreement saying they'll use refrigerated trucks, that the wine has to be kept at a certain temperature, everything. So we want to make sure that things are, you know, done the right way.
So can you walk us through the process? And this might take a minute from when Kermit Lynch Wine Merchants identifies a producer to when it hits the shelves in your, wherever you're listening to this, your local store. Like how many people do you have to go through? Because Kermit doesn't actually own vineyards or wineries. So like, what's that process like?
That's a good question. Cause, I mean, we're looking constantly. We still are now. We have 200 producers in our portfolio. They're just so small. And like, so we have to have like kind of more power in numbers in that way. So we're constantly looking. And so it's doing that groundwork. A lot of times, you know, especially when Kermit talked about it in his book, that he would be out just practically knocking on doors, you know, just like, hey, how are you doing? You know, I don't know much French, but you know any English? No? Okay, well, we'll still bring this out.
Wine is the universal language.
Can I drink wine? Exactly. Can I have some of your wine? And actually, and a lot of the times, and this is, again, I think something that's a real testament to what Kermit set as a standard for us, was that even if he meets someone and saying, you know, I really like your wines, but, you know, could you please, you know, for at least for us, you know, especially when he first started, he was telling everyone, because he kind of figured out the fact that he liked wines that weren't filtered. So he would say, you know, especially in the domestic market in France, they had to filter everything back then. People didn't want to be at a fine dining restaurant and end up with a bunch of sediment in the glass.
Yeah.
And so they would filter it. And Kermit would be like, please, you know, if you can, for our, you know, exports and when I'm bringing the wine over, if you can not filter the wine. And so some people would have to kind of maybe change the way they were doing things a bit. Maybe we even go see them and we're like, hey, can you, you know, if you really could change up some of your farming techniques, you know, we think you have incredible terroir. You know, you have just, you know, the makings of a great wine. And sometimes it takes years, you know, through that process of getting them to that point. And then sometimes you just find someone, you're like, let's go. Come on. Fill up a container. Let's go. But we do have a different business model though, too. So we can there's always a gap, and there's also maybe even we can make it happen a little quicker too, because we don't really inventory the wine in the United States.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
best way to store that wine is those cellars that are underground that are perfect temperature and it's kept there. And if they've got the room, so all of our distributors through the United States, we help them put together containers to bring wine over, and they do that multiple times throughout the year. So, you know, when we meet with them or whenever we have people out there and, you know, kind of putting that together, they ask them, and they're like, well, then can you please just stock the wine for that year, and we'll try to ship it as soon as we can. But we just like that idea of having it be home that whole time.
Sure.
You know, especially with how expensive it is to store wine in the U.S.
So from the moment when they ship it over, does it go to one specific place in the U.S. and then you guys coordinate shipment from there, or does it go to a bunch of different places?
That's like the beautiful thing about this business, is that there's so much to it behind the scenes. You know, it's like everyone I see, you know, especially any friend that follows me on Instagram, because they're like, I never get to see you because you're traveling all the time. And then if I'm home,
I'm gonna follow you on here.
I'm just with my family. It's like I get home, I just want to be with my family because I know I'm going to travel again or whatever. And they look at it and they're just like, oh, what a life. You know, look at this. You're just always eating and drinking, doing. I'm like, yes, I am. But, you know, there's a whole lot more to that business. And like in the background, you know, we have like a whole department that helps set up all of these small limited containers. We have this whole program where, like, especially like small markets, where even Oklahoma's not that small of a market anymore for us. We help them put together, you know, containers, because instead of someone just saying, oh, I can do, you know, 1,300 cases of wine on my own, if they need to ship 200 or 300 cases, we help consolidate all that.
Yeah.
And we have a whole department of people that are just phenomenal.
That's awesome. That's
what they've been doing. Some of them have been doing it for 30 plus years in our department. And I mean, that always, to me, is always kind of something that I have to remember, because there's someone at Kermit Lynch that's at a computer, not out here me doing wine dinners and drinking
you get
the wine
fun part
constantly.
of the job, right?
And they're as happy as can be. They just love being a part of it in any way. So it's, again, speaks to that culture. But yeah, you have to have all that. So yeah, we actually help them consolidate all of it. We'll have containers that come into each market, and they come straight into, you know, a local port, and then the logistics we set up and help them with the logistics to the to their warehouses and everything. So here with Syndicate Revolution, they have probably containers coming in every every other month. So
that's a good amount of wine.
Yeah. It's usually 200 to 400 cases each time.
That's awesome.
Just flowing through. Yeah.
So obviously France and Italy are kind of the epicenter of old world wines. Has there been any thought of expanding beyond those two countries as far as finding producers?
There's people who do amazing jobs at other countries, you know, Spain and you know, Germany, Austria, you know, Australia, whatever, anything else. And there's people who have been, some people have been focusing on those even longer than, you know, we have. So I think that's something that Kermit's been like, that's enough. Even for us, it's like, whew, you know, between France and Italy, I mean, still France is a, you know, major, you know, part of our business. A lot of times I still get people that go, oh, you guys do Italian wine? It's like, when did you start that? It's like 1972.
A long time ago.
Right at the beginning. But
I'm going to swap these and try the white.
I think it should. In fact, that's probably something we should talk about.
Let's talk about this one.
Especially as we got into a little bit of the natural wine kind of phenomenon stuff.
So what makes this special in your mind?
They're just magic. There's some kind of dust or something. I have no
Pixie
idea.
dust or something.
It's I mean, the process, like I'll try not to get too boring with this it's
go into the weeds with it. That's delicious.
What they do, the process of this just still boggles my mind. So Robert Denogent and Puy-Fusset, so you're way far south. Usually it's going to be a bit warmer there. A lot of people in that region have made kind of a lot of bulk wine and, just put it out there as it's, Burgundy as a whole is kind of looked at it as, as things have gotten so expensive within, especially just the Côte d'Or as a whole, they look at it now going, wait a minute, there's some serious, amazing terroir there, people that are taking farming more seriously. And one of those was Jean-Claude Robert. He's, like when we go to France and we go on these trips and we go meet, and see all the producers, we'll drink their new wines and just kind of catch up with them. And you go to Beaujolais and, one of the most, really famous parts of our portfolio is the producers in Beaujolais. That's where kind of more of the natural wine movement was kind of kickstarted and moved on from Jules Chevet kind of teaching Marcel Lapierre and John Foyard and J.P. Thevenet and Guy Breton. One of them was Jean-Claude Robert. And so when we go taste with those guys, you'll be at Lapierre, the Gang of Four, the guys that Kermit kind of termed, coined this term for these guys that were kind of flipping the world over and just going, like, this is what we're doing. We're going to make wine with no additions at all, and we're going to go back and kind of reclaim Beaujolais as a whole. And you go there and you're still sitting there, you're like, oh my God, yeah, that's, there's Jean Foyard, there's his son Alex, there's the Lapierres and the kids are there, and you couldn't be in a better place. Jean-Claude Robert walks in and he's like, things just stop. He's like the godfather.
I was going to say the godfather.
He's like the godfather. He comes in, he sits down, everyone else is kind of standing around him, the little younger kids, and you're like, wait a minute. I mean, he's way down here. Like, why he's up with these guys?
That reputation.
His reputation. His kids are best friends with Mathieu Lapierre and Camille Lapierre, and just the next generation of these people in Beaujolais, and they're just welcomed, with open arms. And his kids, especially, they're amazing. They're quite characters. But like a wine like this is
freaking delicious.
90-year-old vines. Everything's farmed biodynamically. They use a horse to plow. They do. There's really almost zero. There's certain vintages they will add SO2 to the bottling. There's certain vintages they don't at all. They have this whole process that he was explaining to us one time. It was just fascinating. They'll take a bottle that hasn't had any sulfur at all, open it, try it, let it sit for 10 days.
Just open wherever?
Open.
Okay.
If they come back to it and it hasn't, some flaws haven't kind of come up, they're like, okay, cool. That we don't have to add SO2 to that.
Wow.
10 days of being open.
That's incredible.
And it will. This wine, we're doing a disservice. I mean, really, it should be open for about a day, which is really rare for, this style of wine. I mean,
what does that do to it?
Wine.
Just leaving it open like that? Like if you were to buy this bottle and you were to take it home, you're saying you should open it and let it sit for a day before you pour it?
I would open for a day. It's. I would not say that about many wines.
Yeah, that's really rare.
That comes straight from them. They're just like, you should, most of our wines, just because of the fact that they need that time just to kind of come together. Yeah. And they also need some of that, a little more interaction with air.
Well, it reminds me, we were talking about whiskey and bourbon earlier. Like once you do the neck pour, and then that air gets in there, it totally changes
everything about it, and you have that little introduction of oxygen. But that's something for them, is like they use it as a tool. So when they do a press, like when they press the grapes, they do this really slow, drawn out press, like some people do in champagne. And what happens is you get this run of the juice. They want it to have exposure to just a bit of oxygen. And it just gives it a little tiny, little bit of an oxidative quality to the wine. Yeah. they are going for like ripeness over acidity, because in that area it's a little harder to get both of those together.
Sure.
So they go for this nice round ripe version, even though it tastes highly acidic for us. They find acidity in farming, and so the way that they're farming is how they are kind of introducing acidity to it, which that is the limits of my knowledge at that point.
Fair.
I have no idea how that is or what it is. They have found it that way. I mean, that's the way that they've been able to farm. That's how hands-on they are in the whole process of it.
Yeah.
And you get this bottlings that at one point it kind of drove us nuts, because they do a native yeast ferments. And if they're a very, very cold cellar, they'd have fermentations that get stuck for 6-9 months. And we would come down there and we'd say, okay, let's taste the newest vintage. And they're going through like their 19s, and then they'll pour one wine that was a 20. We're like, what happened to the 19 of this wine? They're like, oh, it's still fermenting. We're like, well, what? You're going to skip
You
a
have
vintage?
to have so much patience to do that.
And just no fear whatsoever.
Right.
And
you
so,
know it'll turn right. You know, like it'll happen at some
get
point.
there
Yeah.
if you just let it just kind of do it. And most people don't have that patience or the.
I was going to say money probably plays a large part of that.
These guys don't have money.
Right.
You own land, you own your building for generations. You are just making wine, but you want to make it. No doubt. I don't care what kind of risks we're taking. If we lose something or whatever, they're willing to do it. And a lot of people just aren't. That kind of goes back to that original conversation. Some people just aren't willing to do that. You know, and it's so much easier. I mean, I've done harvests before. I've gone through a whole winemaking process with people, and having someone who machine harvests, it's cheaper, quicker. Going through hand harvesting everything, which all our producers do, a lot more work, a lot more skill involved with it. I've sat at a sorting table of watching grapes come through off of a manual. I mean, off a machine harvested grapes, and it's just sludge.
Yeah.
There's nothing to even recognize. I mean, there's little animals, and it just picks up everything. I mean, it's really not fun. It's much easier though for them. It's easier at that point then just to say, I have no idea what's in this, so let's add a bunch. Let's add commercial yeast to get this started. To make sure. Let's dose this really quick with some SO2 to make sure we kill off anything that could have come in on this. It's it makes sense.
Yeah,
it does.
It does.
Yeah, but even more so, almost doesn't make sense to see what these guys do, because of how much risk it is, and how difficult it is, and how. And that's why they just have our utmost respect.
Yeah. So I'm curious the process of finding a producer.
Yeah.
That Kermit goes through, especially because I'd imagine his threshold of I want to do business with you or not is really freaking high. So how often do you add new producers? Are you always looking, or are you good with the 200 or so that you said you have right now?
Constantly looking.
Okay.
Constantly looking. It's a lot more work for us. We're not involved in that as much. I mean, we'd love to do that, but that's a dedicated job. So with Kermit now, he's fully retired. He's living in Bandol. He's at a home there in Provence for some time. He would live in Berkeley and then south of France on and off. I think since COVID, he's pretty much mostly just stayed down there. So now it's mostly, there's two people, Dixon Brook, who's the president of Kermit Lynch. He's been there for, I think, 30 plus years. And then Anthony Lynch, Kermit's son.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's still like a family run business. Dixon started in the retail store.
Yeah.
I mean, just working retail store, doing whatever he could. Moved then over to Beaune to work in our offices in France and just try to be as immersed in it as possible, and moved his way on up, and it's nice to be able to see that. But they're out there constantly looking, and it's, I would think it's a pretty difficult job. I've talked to Anthony about this a few times where, he says that there's areas, we're looking at Italy a lot right now just because France has had a lot of issues with climate change, like massive, massive issues, and just, really not finding
I was actually reading about that the other day.
Consistency. I mean,
Yeah.
I'll always remember this. Last year, I came here for doing a trade show here, and as soon as I landed, I looked at my phone and I had an email saying that there was tornadoes that hit in Chateauneuf-du-Pape. And I'm landing in
they
Oklahoma.
had a tornado.
Never in recorded history.
Right.
And I'm like, am I mixing my brain as just like a little fuzzy? Is it saying that there's a tornado in Oklahoma? Because that's not really a headline. That can happen.
It's Tuesday.
Yeah, it's a Tuesday.
Every other
who knows?
Tuesday in April.
And it was, they had a tornado come through and wiped out all the fruit. Like we really don't think there will be a 2022 Vue Telegraph LaCroix, which is one of the most iconic wines in Chateauneuf-du-Pape. They lost pretty much all the fruit, but that stuff's happening. And then we're having, droughts. They're having Burgundy. I mean, Burgundy is still one of our top money kind of dollar producing regions. And, 21, there might not be even really much white Burgundy in the marketplace at all because they lost, most of it to frost.
Yeah.
They get these, buds starting to break and they get like a weird sunny week in the, middle of, February and things start budding out of nowhere and then it gets frost and boom, it's all gone. It doesn't recover. And that's been tough, to rely on. So, we're looking more and more in Italy where they're having just consistent vintages over and over and over again. And Anthony said he's gone through certain villages and certain areas of Italy, and we're always looking for like that farmer. We want someone who is, that's their job, really.
Right.
I mean, great wine is made in the vineyard. It's not,
You're looking for the overalls and the people that
you
are
want that
in
calloused
the,
hand.
yeah.
You want someone who's just like, I'll talk to you later after I'm done plowing, or whatever. And he'll meet these people, and they're like, "Oh no, we have an enologist that helps us and has made our wine." And he tries the wine. He's like, "Okay, this tastes kind of just very basic," and goes to the next place, the exact same enologist making the exact same wine. And he's like, "Oh gosh, it's very frustrating. You might spend a whole week, that you have in one spot, and that's what you run into." And then you find that just right place. Like we just added a Brunello producer that they weren't farming organically. They were using commercial yeast. They were just starting to kind of make their own wine. They'd been selling their grapes from the beginning of Brunello being set up as a region. And they just had this perfect terroir. And so it took some time, but of Dixon and Anthony just telling them like, hey, like we talked about a little bit earlier, like that was a perfect example of them like, let's switch to organic farming. It will help you get to a point. Then you can start using native yeast ferments because you'll have a little more biodiversity. You'll have that yeast there. Also give some time for maybe some of the commercial yeast to kind of get out of the area and. They're working towards that. They've gone to that direction. We jumped on early just because we knew that this would be a great producer in time. And, whatever we can kind of grab right now. There's a lot of people looking for wine.
Sure.
There's a lot of people who are importing wine.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a race, but we're fortunate that, we've got that, at least a name and a history that people are like, okay, wait a minute. No, I want to be.
Yeah.
We have people reach out to us too. Like I probably get an email, probably all
Come
of
try
us
my
working
wine.
for Kermit Lynch.
Yeah.
We get emails probably once a week from just someone just spamming everybody at Kermit. I'm in Chile making wine and Kenny and we're like, no.
Yeah.
Best of luck and still I get we get invites to some some wine festival or something trying to get us to try the wines and I just need to start telling them to send me samples, I guess.
That's the way to do it. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I'm the man. Yeah, I'm the guy you want to talk to.
Send me the samples.
I need 3 cases.
So I'd imagine if you're able to tell these producers like, hey, let's switch you to organic farming, let's do this, that's an exclusive deal that they make with Kermit, correct? So like if they're the only way they can get their wines into the U.S. is to go through Kermit.
We try to. We look for it.
Okay.
But
because that could be wholesale changes that you're asking them to make. Yeah. So I would assume it was.
Those are, and in those situations, it probably usually is. It is usually someone saying, okay, we do really want to be exporting. You're the one we want to use. We'll listen to whatever you guys kind of have to tell us. But quite often, like there's people who got that, again, inspiration from Kermit, with Kermit just opening a retail store in Berkeley, California, and then him going to these people directly and not relying on other importers and just saying, okay, I want to bring in wine just for my wine shop. Because that's all it was for decades. I mean, it was for quite some time was just bringing wine into his shop. So it wasn't about selling wine all over the country.
Such a great expansion from that start,
and
from making the flying carpets to then
yes,
doing
and flying
this.
carpets
Like, I mean,
to
it's
then
just
importing
such a
wines
great.
without using flying carpets. I mean, that's where he really made
Prince
a mistake.
Ali would just love him to death. It would just be the best.
Oh, now my daughter can listen to this now. She'll be able to relate to it. Probably the rest of it, but
Yeah, right.
there's so there's a lot of times then there was shops that did the same thing. So sometimes we'll find a producer that says you can, we'll give you the wines, but you can't sell it in Oregon, Texas.
Oh, they get
Utah.
that specific. Okay.
Because they probably had someone at one
Other
point
relationships
that came
with-
in and
yeah.
just said, "Hey, I can't buy all your wine, but if I buy a pallet of it a year, will you let me direct import it from my store?"
Is that a normal thing in the industry?
It has become some sort of one. I mean, there's a lot of them that have gotten that kind of creativity and going, okay, wait a minute.
It is creative.
It is. And it's better margins for them.
Sure.
They'll be able to bring in wine and not have to pay through another importer and have someone else to do that with. It's just tough. You're looking for then really, really small producers that don't care. They're like, yeah, all right, I can give you, 30 cases a year or whatever.
Yeah.
Where we're looking for quite a bit more, but not always. I mean, we have a couple producers that we bring in maybe 100 cases, and that's it for the whole United States, or maybe only 30 or 40, and they just go into California just for the retail store.
Yeah.
So we'll take it all if it's great wine. It's just, we're happy to have it no matter what.
Sure.
And, we got to make up a website page for them. We got to do all the importing stuff, get all that
That's
work.
one thing I do appreciate
just to do
about
that.
Kermit's website is the info on all of the producers. Like, you click on any one under the France or Italy tab, and then, I mean, it's a whole backstory. Like, it's
love it.
fantastic.
I love it.
Yeah.
I used to have a hard time with it because I have a lot to do. I have a lot of a job to do.
Yeah.
I'm.
Are you writing those?
Going around? I'm not. They'll ask us sometimes if we want to write like parts of the newsletter or something like that. They're the ones doing like an interview with the producer, finding out what they want on that for a marketing standpoint. But I've actually had quite a few because it's hard to kind of keep track of 200 producers.
a lot.
Of a couple thousand SKUs. So knowing what the cepage is on a certain wine or the blend of that wine, the barrel regiment, the history of that producer, sometimes, my brain doesn't work, especially after being 3 days in Oklahoma, doesn't
You
work
say
as
that like
well
it's
as
a
it
bad
should.
thing.
I've had buyers correct me or help me. Like, I'm like, oh man, I'm trying to remember what's exact. And they're like, oh, I think that's 75% Grenache, 15%. I'm like, they're all at least according to the text sheet. And you're like,
Okay.
that's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
I used to at one point be like, oh my God, I'm never going to know as much as like some people out there in the business and knowing the wines. Yeah, you get over that pretty quick because there's people that have dedicated their lives to that knowledge aspect of it. There's a lot more that we have to know and keep in mind and do. But that passion's there to try to learn as much as you can. But there's a lot of information, a lot of stuff that we got. But that website, we have literally dedicated department.
That's awesome.
That's all they do.
Yeah.
And I mean, I always like bringing it up too, is that we still send a printed newsletter to people for free in their mail. If they
I
want
love
it.
that. Yeah.
I mean,
that's old school
That's
marketing
where it all
right there.
started.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how actually I think what did it for Kermit was that whenever he would bring these wines over back in the 70s, no one knew what they wore.
I'm going to be honest with you. That speaks to me, and TC will laugh at this, but back in his previous days at different restaurants, I'd come in and he'd bring a bottle of wine and he'd start telling me what it was, and it would be like Charlie Brown teacher in my ears. And I'm like, I don't know the words you're saying. But when I go into Ranch Acres or wherever, I look for the Kermit Lynch. And I do that. And I'm not telling you that because you're sitting across from me, but I actually do that because I know if it's something I don't know what it says on the label, but it has the Kermit Lynch stamp on it, I'm like, okay, I know it at least goes through whatever quality checks it goes through, that it's going to be good wine.
That, I mean, it makes me, every one of us, it not only like makes us smile, it almost makes us just kind of like, oh God, like it's like the most humbling, just beautiful thing.
I get that, and I'm serious too. And
I
I'm
hear
not just
it,
saying that
but I
because you're
hear
across
it
from me.
I hear it once a week at least. There's not a week I don't think that's gone by since I've ever represented a wine from Kermit Lynch that someone has not told me that. And it's still, I have sat there at times thinking about it, going like, how did we not screw that up?
Right. It's easy to screw up. Yeah.
50 years. Like you think about something that someone bought, because Kermit Lynch has turned into, it's almost like a brand. It's a representation of something that people can, trust and rely on. If you think about 50 years ago, like if you're talking about something in the mid 70s, someone probably was like, I'm going to go look for a GE, TV or whatever, or Westinghouse.
It's brand recognition is what it is.
Brand recognition. We probably don't buy that same brand now. It's probably burned us multiple times over because they've been bought by somebody else. It's been switched over. It's been made somewhere else, whatever it is. And somehow it's just we've been able to stick to just what Kermit's always stood by, that for 50 years you still have people to this day saying, I rely on that.
Yeah, that's why I was asking what the criteria is to become a producer for Kermit, because it is so consistent. Like the varietals will change, where it's from will change, the region will change, all of that. But there's a trust there from the consumer side that whatever varietal, whatever region it's from, if it has that name on it, then it's going to be really good, a really good representation of what that is.
And I think that's something too that we don't take for granted. We talk about it quite a bit because it's even more, it's even stricter than you would even think.
I'm sure.
Because we love using this example. I don't know if this story over time has become like the game of telephone, where
how much
story's been told, how much has changed. But there was a time where Kermit imported Sassicaia, which is an iconic, just one of the most sought after wines in Italy. And they made a very traditional, a Tuscan wine at the time. And then they decided, what, the points, we want to go for, Parker, whatever it was, the Parkerization of kind of wines, of people trying to hit that palate strategy of big wines. The super Tuscan wines took over, and they're like, that's where we're going to go. Told Kermit's just like, you'll be successful, but we won't import the wines anymore. It just turned away something that could have changed the rest of his career.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's happened multiple times. We have it quite a bit where we want producers in Bordeaux.
Yeah.
But Bordeaux is a place where you have to go through too many hoops. It's they have actually a whole system where the producer makes the wine, they then sell it to a broker. That broker then sells it to an importer. You can't deal directly with the house.
Thanks.
Yeah. So Kermit would just say, screw it. You're not gonna let me go around, meeting these people. But he would find certain people who then would want to, like, no, we're making wines along your ethos of what you want, which again is going to be, people are at least farming sustainably. It's hard to use a requirement as like organics because you try to tell someone who's learned how to farm from their great-grandfather, who learned how to farm from their grandfather and great-grandfather, and you say like, oh, why aren't you certified organic? They're like, what the hell, man? We haven't changed how we farm. Right. Why should I then have to get certified for something that I farm better than someone who can say that they farm organically? So it's more of just then you need that history. There's we have a producer in Liguria, Punta Crena, that they've been there for 500 years. Their winery is literally, and their vineyards are in the middle of this city called Verigote. It's this beautiful, beautiful beach community. And you go and pull up to his driveway and you try to find a parking spot. It's almost impossible in the summer because everyone's parking in front of his place to walk to the beach.
To go to the beach, yeah.
Because they were there 500 years ago before any, buildings were there. And now it's like this big beach resort. And, you're just asking him, like, people ask, like, is this like, is it a natural leaning wine? Is it organic? Is it this or that? I'm like, you ask him, he'll just tell you, I've farmed the same way that everyone has here for 500 years. So I don't know what that requirement is. Like, what does that, match? There was no Roundup. There was no, artificial kind of, fertilizers or anything. It's just, that's the way they've been doing it.
Is that something Kermit requires to be certified organic?
Not at all. Because of that reason.
Because of that.
Yeah. that means nothing really, because
Right.
all that means is they have to do more paperwork and pay some money.
Sure. Yeah.
And some of these guys have, been doing it for so long that they're just like, and their requirements or maybe their qualifications of what they want to farm is better than what the organic certification is.
Sure.
And then some of them want to, just because they know that some people will be looking on that label going, oh, it's certified organic, I'll take that.
Yeah.
Because not everybody understands that if it says Kermit Lynch, then it's at least going to be farmed in a sustainable way. It's not going to have, hopefully, a bunch of junk inside there, So that does help. But
before I delve us into our last topic, do we want to give love to the other bottle? We gave love to this bottle. Do we want to give love to that bottle too?
Yeah, I've actually got a story. This just happened in January of this year. So this is Domaine Tempier. If there's anybody who's probably had more of a connection to like Kermit and just where he's almost like family there, it's the Peyrade family that own Domaine Tempier. It's, if you look, this is something I'll go through this kind of quick because can open up a whole other.
That's what happens on here. We go tangents and things. It just happens.
It says imported by Kermit Lynch Wine Merchant on the front of the label.
Mm-hmm. Normally it's on the back.
Yeah, right there.
Yep.
So there's been other importers who have used that as a knock on Kermit Lynch, going, dude, he's putting his name on the front of a producer's label. This is their real estate, not ours.
Right.
Back label is us. That's where we've got to put the information, all the warnings, all that stuff. Like, how dare they do that? It's like such a it's
like a faux pas in that world or whatever.
Like, don't
right?
you dare do that. And so I remember Kermit telling me this one time at a dinner, and he's like, somebody was saying that like using that against me, and it was on a wine forum online, and I just cannot even imagine seeing Kermit doing this. He went online, made up a name for logged in, registered on this forum, and his name was Kermit Lynch on there.
Not hiding who he was.
Not hiding anything.
Right.
And it was a topic of conversation of someone saying that, going, what an arrogant asshole that he would put his name on the front of one of his producer's labels. And he went on there, registered himself, went on there. You can still Google this. I found the forum and everything. And this was like 15, 20 years ago. Like, didn't even know there's forums involved.
Honestly, yeah.
And he went on there and was just like, I am like deeply hurt by this. He's like, I've had these producers come to me and say, can we put your name on the front? There's only so many people that are going to turn it around constantly. And he said, no, not at all. That's not cool. That's your label. That's your domain. And they just kept bugging him about it. And it just started happening. And Tempier is one of those that feels just honored, even though we are even more honored to deal with
Absolutely,
them. That they put, imported by Kermit Lynch on the front. And that's how kind of a close relationship we had with them. And for me, it's still my be-all, end-all. I could drink Tempier every day for the rest of my life. Yeah. Rosé, whites, blancs, the reds especially, it's just, to me, perfection. And part of my job of being able to go and meeting these people, and she would go on these trips. In January, we had dinner with the Peyrade family in their home, and it was just one of those moments where I was like fighting back tears the whole time. You're just like, oh my God, I'm here right now doing this. Yeah. Daniel Ravier is the winemaker there, and they've kind of adopted him as practically like family. He's a genius. I think one of the greatest winemakers there is right now. And he would go around to people asking them, like, what's your birth year? And I'm sitting there, like, regretting this question because my birth year is 1975. It's one of the worst vintages in all of France has ever had. And he's going around asking people, and there were some pretty good vintages that people were born in. He's like, I've got that. I've got magnums. We keep magnums. And he comes to me, and I say 75. He's like, no magnums. And it made sense because 75 was really low yields, really difficult vintage. He goes, but I have two 750s, and I'll bring them. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. He's like, no. I said, that was a horrible vintage. He's like, yes. He goes, I'm going to bring you those two bottles. Brings them out. Again, every time he'd bring out one of those magnums of someone's birth year, they'd be like take a picture.
Sure,
Look at me,
absolutely.
look at this. Look at this.
Yeah.
And we'd have it, and they were beautiful. The 75 comes out, and I try it. I'm just like, all right, is it just me? I'm in their house.
Is it product of circumstance?
Exactly.
The
winemaker poured it for me. It's like the greatest thing I've ever drank. Of course, it's like part of all that. Whole mystique is there. And I was just like, I was beyond thankful. He let me take the 2 bottles with me they're empty, and I took them. And the next day we had lunch with Kermit at Clos Saint Magdalene in Cassis. It was a beautiful property. And he's asking us, like, what did you guys drink last night? We all went through our birth years. Oh man, he opened up this one. And he looks at me, and I said, he opened up my birth year. He's like, what is it? I said, 75. And he stops. He's like, greatest vintage they ever made. I said, Kermit, how can you say that? It was like legitimately one of the worst vintages there was in all of France. He goes, that's why it's the best vintage they ever made. He goes, he's famous for, at a time when Parker, a lot of different reviewers were saying, this is your vintage chart. So if you're going to buy wine in Burgundy and Bordeaux, Barolo, whatever, these are the vintages you look for. That pisses off Kermit so much. Pisses off the producers, too.
I'm
Because
sure.
these producers that are making, I mean, that means that bad vintage is probably just broke them.
Yeah.
They had to put so much more work into what they were making. Some producers just, it's a bad yield, bad vintage, whatever, will do the best, but whatever. And it shows. The people who then look at it going, this is I'm ready, let's take this on, and I'm going to just do the best I can. This is how I'm going to get around this drought or mold, mildew, whatever the issues they had. That's why he's like, I think that is what makes that wine so great, because they made a beautiful wine at a time when no one else made a wine that was even barely drinkable. And he goes, that to me was a sign of, the best wine they ever made. And he put in his newsletter one year just a blank page. Here's my long-awaited, list of the best vintages, and it was a blank page of his newsletter, and on the back it just said "Drink by producer." Support your producer no matter what.
Yeah.
You have someone you love their wines, see what they did, see what they what they had to do to deal with this, or actually at least see what happens whenever there's lower yields or there's too much yield. There was late rains, there was droughts. You can see that on the palate. You can taste it. You can see it by looking at the wine. And I mean, why cherry pick just the best vintages? You're not learning anything at that point. So, yeah.
That's a great story. That makes me want to go hang out at their house.
Oh yeah, it's.
I don't know how the '84 vintage was, but I would like to figure that out.
It's Tempier.
I mean, right? It'd be great.
It's gonna be brilliant. But this is probably one of the most famous, most iconic rosés
it's
on
delicious.
the planet. It's also something that people don't realize is that this is a baby. It's 2021. This thing's got a long, long life ahead of it. These can be drank, 10, 15 years easy, even more age on them. So that's what I love about these wines too.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right, last topic, and then I'll let you get out of here because I know you have a flight to catch at some point today. In your travels around the country and doing what you do, I like to ask people any industry trends that they've noticed, any directions they see things headed, as far as maybe varietals or just attitude of the consumers. Have you noticed anything shift in the last year or two since everyone's kind of back to normal after 2020?
I think just, again, more people drinking wine, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Of just youth, older, just across the board. I think just people are getting a lot more, educated on kind of what's going on in the wine business too. And probably one of the most important ones is them being educated on the fact that there is a difference between someone who makes a kind of a commercially made wine and someone who's making something that shows their soul, their personality, the terroir of the land, the region, what they're dealing with as a whole. And you're seeing that a lot more. You're also seeing, people really kind of taking this serious. I mean, I've got to do a little plug for one of my favorite wine bars in San Antonio, Little Death. These guys, shout out to Chad and team.
I'll tag them in that.
Yeah. They're in San Antonio, a place that probably most people think is like a an island with no wine whatsoever. And
I would
you're
not have
just
thought of a good wine
nothing.
bar in San Antonio.
It's brilliant. It's a great spot.
I would have thought of Mexican food and the
funnest
San Antonio
place.
Spurs.
Oh yeah,
That's where my mind would have went.
they're still big fans of the Spurs. That's for sure. But you see these places opening up all over the place. I mean, I still have people, again, whenever I'm coming to Oklahoma, I tell people, where are you going? Everybody always asks me, like, where are you going next week? Where are you going this time? Or whatever. Oh, Oklahoma City and Tulsa. Like, oh, wow, really? What did they, why do you have to do that? I'm like, because I want to. Because you have places like this that have great restaurants, great wine bars, places I want to go hang out. And you're seeing more of those in just markets. And I think with social media, like we've had quite a few. We have a lot of very highly allocated, difficult to find wines. And there was a time where, those went just to certain markets that knew what they were. Back again, when I first started in Reno, we'd have stacks of certain producers that I'm not even going to bring up because it's always an issue I bring up of the names we would just get as much as we wanted because we knew about it at that time. Now everyone knows what who Thierry Allemande is, or Jean Gonan, and some producers that we have that it's now I'm having to save wine for Oklahoma to allocate some of those hard to find producers because enough wine gets sold here. So it's become even like a bigger world for us in wine. So that's something that's just makes us so happy. It's a lot of work to get to that point, but there's much worse work that we could be doing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I did think of one more question that I've always wanted to ask, and I don't know if there's an easy answer to it, so I don't know how you're going to answer this. But so you were saying the top end of what you bring in is like $3-4 grand, something like that. Yeah. And then there's I've had really good $20, $30, $40 bottles of wine. Yeah. In your mind, what's the difference from the producer in the $3 to $4 grand range to kind of what most people would normally buy at a retail store? Is it just age of where it's coming from and reputation of that producer, or is there something more tangible that makes it cost more than others?
I really like that question because
thank you.
I do, because I think a lot of people are afraid to ask that because they think that, of course, come on, why wouldn't that wine be $4,000 a bottle? It's, there's a lot to it. It's going to be regions,
sure.
Of course, that, highly, highly expensive bottle is going to be, like Costerie, Corton Charlemagne. It's, one of the most epic white wines made in the world, probably one of the greatest there is. Very little of it made, and so, of course, it's going to be expensive.
I guess quantity would be a good part of that. Yeah.
Now, anything that Raphael Koch touches is pretty much gold. It's that good.
Yeah.
They are one of the greats. The thing is, though, is that, we have producers like Sylvain Fedot at Dopiac. We have producers like Maxime Magnon that are in Languedoc-Roussillon. This is a region that most of the bulk $4 grocery store Vin de France wines are made. It's a place where they just grow. You can grow as much grapes as you want, yield-wise. It's just so beautiful soil. It makes tons of wine. Those guys probably work harder than someone who has a $500 bottle of wine.
Interesting.
To make because of where they're at, their price points are kind of held back because people aren't going to spend that much from a wine from a certain region. We have actually producers, Fontenesse and Chateau Le Roque. He makes both wines for both properties, his property and another one that I think more goes into. He has this 100% Cabernet Sauvignon in Languedoc-Roussillon, which makes no sense. That's there, that he's making it. That sells for like $15. I guarantee you more work goes into that bottle than pretty much anyone else we have in the portfolio. It's crazy to see the passion and the work and what goes into some of these. And so, it could be someone working their ass off for that $10 bottle, compared to someone working their ass off for a $5,000 bottle. It's all the magic that's in between that.
Sure.
So I love that part of it because that's where some of those gems can be found, where someone's just pouring their heart, and sweat and blood and tears and all of it into something that has a limit on how much money they can really make.
Absolutely. Well, man, I appreciate you stopping by.
Oh, it's my
This
pleasure.
was a lot of fun. You brought some fantastic wine, or TC did. You and TC brought some fantastic wine.
I bought both of those just yesterday over at Ranch Acres. And just going through, and I'm like, we gotta have some fun wines to be able to do this with.
That.
So
I love that. Where can people read up more on Kermit and all that stuff? What's socials? What's website? All that.
Appreciate that. I mean, it's a must. It's like almost a rite of passage in the wine world that, I mean, if you need one to break into TC's car, he's got like 24 books of Kermit Lynch's adventures on the wine route. So
if you have 23 tomorrow, it's because I took one, right?
Do you got good insurance? Glass breakage insurance, I hope. All right. Sorry, guys. That book, I mean, it really, again, something that people bring up to me every week too. It's like, oh, I read the book. The book is one of the most fascinating, really, he's a great storyteller. And Adventures on the Wine Route, you can still get it on Amazon for $13 or something. He did a re-release of it on the 20th anniversary, I think it was, or 25th anniversary. And it's just brilliant. It's a great writing style. And then, our website, but go on the website. There's an area for the newsletter. You can get an email newsletter. It comes out, or I always suggest people get the printed one.
I'm going to get the physical
Even
copy.
Though it costs us money to do.
Yeah.
I mean, we ship it for free. It doesn't cost anything. I have people that bring it up all the time. Like I just had someone at a wine dinner at the country club in Oklahoma City that said, I just love the writing style of, Dixon compared to Anthony's, compared to Steve Waters in the store. And I'm like, it's almost like that he knows these people of like I've read about them and know them. And it's so cool. It's just such an amazing thing to see. And always just suggest doing it because there's such cool stories in there that, stuff that I learn all the time by reading through the newsletters, going through. So, we appreciate everyone, supporting what we do, and we need it.
Sure.
We don't sell to the big grocery chains and stuff. We got to rely on local people and local independent businesses, and we love what we do. Yeah.
Well, next time you're in town, stop back by and we'll continue the conversation.
We'll do it anytime, John.
All right. Cheers, man. See you next time on the Tasting Room.